Welcome, Swayze Foster, to rawandcookedvegan.com, and I appreciate you joining us here. And you were just telling me a little bit about your family, and it sounded like there wasn't a great deal of focus on nutrition. Like you said, your parents kind of just wanted to give you what they could, and it was like with love, but perhaps not the most knowledge about nutrition, right?
Definitely. It was definitely nutrition was as long as you're getting enough food, you're nourished. So,
Right, right, right.
right.
And did you grow up in Tennessee? Are you from Tennessee originally?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So, and it's probably been interesting for you in what is kind of a, biscuits and gravy kind of culture, doing the raw food thing. So I want to hear a lot more about that. But at what age did you start to become interested in nutrition and food? In a more health conscious way.
Right. So I was about 16 or 17.
Hmm.
And the main reason was just for weight loss. So I started exercising first and then quickly realized that while I did lose some weight, I really wasn't eating healthy. And I had basically gone the processed low fat route. So I'd still eat cookies, but they were the lower fat cookies. So
Right,
I knew
right.
that wasn't the best way to go. And so literally I researched fruit and vegetable diet because I knew that fruits and vegetables were the best foods. And interestingly enough, I had a gynecologist who was from India, and she had mentioned something about how awful our food pyramid was and that it should have been focused on fruits and vegetables. And that
Wow.
always stuck with me. And so I researched fruit and vegetable book, and I found Eat to Live by Dr. Joel Fuhrman.
Okay.
And so that got me on eating more fruits and vegetables and vegan, which I was never interested in. I always thought it was crazy. And so that's basically what got me started on the path to being more healthy.
All right, now that's interesting. Why did you kind of think that veganism was crazy and kind of out there in left field?
Well, my older sister had done it years before, and by done it, I mean she went vegan and would have like an orange for breakfast, and then nearly pass out later in the day because she wasn't eating anything. And so
Right,
to me, it was just like, oh, it's vegan. We have canines, so we should eat meat. It's kind of that whole thing.
right.
So to me, it was just always crazy hippies and stuff like that. And then when I read Eat to Live, having no idea that it was promoting a low animal product or even a vegan diet, reading the book, and it wasn't just your regular diet book. It's very research based. I mean, I couldn't deny the information. And so I was like, well, guess I'll be a vegan then.
I love that. It's just very practical, very scientific, and I sense that in a lot of the work that you do. It's just down to earth, nuts and bolts. I love that.
Thank
So
you.
yeah, so you're like 16 and you read this book, and then it'd be interesting to hear. Was it difficult at that age for you to kind of embark on this diet, considering your family's dietary orientation, and also, in the broader culture as well?
Not really. I mean, my parents were always very, very supportive. And I think I always was able to explain my case very well. And so they just kind of, they may have a little minor concerns, and then I would talk to them about it and they'd be fine. So, I kind of just went gung ho and started making all these weird foods in the kitchen, and yeah, so I never had a huge problem. The only thing that did become difficult was dining out because I would eat out a lot with friends. And so that was a little more difficult to try to make sure that food was, vegan or at least vegetarian. So that was a
Right.
bit of a struggle.
Okay. And it sounds like I think I just lost you there a little bit. You still there?
Yeah.
Okay. So I just lost you for a moment. What I wanted to ask you was, it sounds like you kind of directly focused on fruits and vegetables, which would imply a raw orientation. Did you do a little bit with cooked vegan food at first, or did you go just kind of straight primary fruits and vegetables?
Yeah, Eat to Live is not all raw. So that's what I did at first. And I found that while I loved eating more fruit, and I definitely was eating more fruit, it was still more of a snack thing, or
Okay.
I would have something for breakfast and maybe one banana.
Okay.
one orange or something, or maybe an orange after dinner. And so really my meals were very much grain and starch based, which is not eat to live. He is big on fruits and vegetables, but I just found that very hard to be satiating. And a lot of the recipes, I love Eat to Live, but a lot of the recipes in that book are awful, especially if you're used to really salty, sweet foods. I mean, his anti-cancer soup was just nauseating to me, and I spent so much time making it, and it just tasted awful. So
Oh,
for me, just especially, I was getting in more fruit definitely, but eating the vegetables was very hard for me. And so I ended up just, I'd have oatmeal for breakfast, I'd have a sandwich for lunch, I'd have
yeah.
crackers or chips and salsa for a snack, and then more the rice and stuff for dinner. So basically, everything I was eating was grains and starches.
Had you at this time become familiar with Dr. McDougall?
I did know about him, and but I really stuck with Fuhrman more because again, I knew fruits and vegetables were good, and I was really trying to eat more of them. But it was a struggle. I was definitely eating more of a McDougall diet.
Okay. So along these lines, there's another question that crops up, and that is when you initially transitioned from, I guess, what you might characterize as a sad diet or, just a kind of, American diet without a lot of concern towards nutrition. When you first made this change, did you have any health issues at that time? Did you see any resolution of issues? Did you see any new issues arise because it was such a heavy grain and perhaps still high-fat diet? What were some of the changes in that regard?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, like I said, I was able to lose weight, and going on Furman, I was able to lose a lot of weight. And um, my main issue was anemia, which I had before I started eating vegan. And then eating vegan, and I think eating so many grains and starches just exacerbated that to the point where I was having trouble staying awake in the afternoon, staying awake when I was driving because I was very busy at the time. I worked and I also went to school, and I was a pet sitter. So I did a lot of driving to clients' homes,
Wow.
and I would have to have someone with me in the car. Once 3 o'clock hit, I could not drive safely by myself. I would fall asleep at the wheel. So I was just constantly exhausted. And I felt it was very frustrating for me because, I was 18, 19 and doing what I thought was supposed to be the healthiest diet. And I was having all these problems. So that's basically when Raw came into the picture.
Can I ask you, when you said that you'd been diagnosed as anemic prior to making any dietary changes, had they prescribed iron supplements?
Yeah, it was my gynecologist again. And she literally just said, oh, right before I left, she was like, by the way, you're anemic, take some iron supplements. Which I tried, and those were awful for me. They were huge and hard to swallow, and I became very constipated, and they were just so I stopped taking them after like a week, I think. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's very interesting. A whole nother topic that I know you could tell the viewers a lot about, but we'll kind of stick with this trajectory here. So now you're in your 20s. You've kind of been experimenting with maybe what might be called a cooked vegan diet, and but you've had this goal of more raw foods. And so would you say you were gradually progressing towards that more and more raw in the diet?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I would have good points where I was eating more fruits and vegetables, and then, my low point when I was doing so poorly and the anemia was so bad. It was just I just found it so hard, and I didn't make the connection at the time. I didn't know that it was because I was eating so many grains and whatnot. So I really didn't know what I was doing wrong. And I think it's so easy for us to kind of convince ourselves that we are eating lots of fruits and vegetables. We really are when I was really eating lots of rice and oatmeal and bread and stuff. So
That's a great point. That's a great because I still eat cooked food and I do a good bit of grains, so it's great to remember. And maybe you could clarify for me and others. I remember reading something about this. What exactly happens? It's components within grains that bind up iron or that prevent the proper absorption of iron. Is that what goes on?
right, yeah, they're called anti-nutrients, and there's various ones, and they can bind to certain minerals like calcium and magnesium and iron, and basically inhibit your body's absorption of these minerals. And so, it's not going to be a problem if you're getting enough of those minerals, number one, and then also not eating a whole lot of these foods. But if they're the basis of your diet and you're a female, a premenopausal female, it can really be an issue. So,
Okay, very interesting. And do you think that if someone got the right kind of iron supplement, that would be able to resolve this kind of issue that's caused by excessive grain eating? I mean, ideally, probably reducing the grains to a limited quantity, but for those that are on a cooked vegan diet, would you say that if they supplement with iron, that might solve the issue?
yeah, definitely. I mean, iron supplementation works, and it depends on because the type, and I can't remember the names of the different forms, but the form that I had been using is not one that you want to use, and it typically is associated with constipation. And if you take a lot of iron, obviously that can be really, really bad. That can kill you. It's a can be a really dangerous thing. But supplementing with iron, it definitely works, and it can definitely help for people who are eating a cooked vegan diet that's predominated in, grains and stuff like that. And I think many experts would recommend that people eating such a diet do supplement with, especially premenopausal women, do supplement with iron.
Okay. Now, but for you personally, it sounds like you kind of reached this low point where the anemia had the worst symptoms, and then did this initiate changes in diet or changes in other ways?
Yeah, so I guess this would have been in 2007 and towards the end of 2007. And so, again, I was just I didn't know what to do. And I learned about raw, and I'd kind of heard about it a little bit on like forums that I would go to. And so, I just thought it sounds crazy, but these people sound kind of nuts, but I don't know what to do at this point, and I can't keep doing this. I mean, I'm just feeling really terrible. And so,
And you didn't want to go back to a SAD diet.
no, definitely not. I didn't want to gain the weight back. And, I'd had seen improvements at first in energy and whatnot. And, I knew that eating vegan, just from a scientific standpoint, or at least a very low animal product diet, was healthier. So that honestly, like, I never even thought that that was like an option. So,
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so you reach this conclusion. There is some problem. I want to stick with veganism, but I want to make some changes that'll resolve this. So what happened from there?
yeah, so I learned about raw, and I believe it's still very popular on Amazon, a recipe book and a raw recipe book, and started doing that. And I did it for about 2 weeks and just basically said, this is a crazy fad. I'm not doing this anymore. Because it was just, number one, I was spending more time preparing food than I was when I cooked food. That was crazy to me. Number
Yeah.
two, I just felt so unsatisfied and so hungry. And the main thing was that, having come from Dr. Fuhrman and other, vegan thinkers, I knew that eating a lower fat diet was healthier. And that had, helped me too. And so seeing this diet, and I finally calculated it out, and it was like 600 to 800 calories a day was from fat or something.
Wow.
And it was like 40%. And I was just like, this doesn't make sense. This diet is nuts and seeds and oils. Like, this can't be healthy. I'm eating less fruits and vegetables now than I was before. I mean, this just doesn't make sense. And so I was like, okay, this is just some weird, crazy fad.
That
And
was
then
so smart of you to just do the calorie breakdown. I mean, how many people eat that diet for like years and suffer from it and don't just do that's just so smart. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, yeah, and that, commenting on that, that's something that I like to get across is that, raw is very important, but I think what's even more important is to eat a high carbohydrate, lower fat diet, and get in your fruits and vegetables. And for the most part, your standard high fat raw way doesn't do that, even in the fruits and vegetables category. I mean, I've seen so many raw meals that are just mostly nuts and seeds and oils with some vegetables. I mean, it's just not a healthy way to eat. And so you have people going from standard American to raw, just assuming that it's raw, it's better when it's not. So I was fortunate enough to have that background in, healthy vegan eating before I went raw. So again, 2 weeks, I was like, I'm done with this.
That's good. And since we're here, there's a question I'd like to ask you that I ask a lot of folks in the raw food community. Uh, this is probably a simplistic way of characterizing things, and it can depend on a lot of variability. But generally, I kind of look at the SAD diet as the worst diet. Then maybe something like a paleo is a little bit better than that, and then something like vegetarian is better than that, and then maybe a cooked vegan, and then a raw vegan, as just a general scale. Now recognizing that high fat in any of those would be a problem, and there could be variables within all of them. But would you say that that's a way to look at it, that the diet progresses towards more health in that way?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it, and I think a way that I like to portray is just if you can eat more fruits and vegetables, you're automatically doing something better for yourself. And that's one area that's so not controversial. Everyone
Right.
agrees that fruits and vegetables are the healthiest foods, and if you can eat more of them, you're going to be healthier. So I think that's something that, if anyone can do, they should feel good about, that they're just eating more fruits and vegetables.
That's great. And if you just make that the focus, naturally what will happen is you'll start replacing those things in your diet which are not good with fruits and vegetables. I like that. Very simple. Yeah. Okay, so then you decided this high-fat raw diet was not good, and what happened next?
So then I was on, I believe it was the vegan bodybuilding forum actually, and this crazy person whose name was Richard Blackman. He now goes by something Sunrise or something,
I've heard
and
of him.
he had posted a daily log of what he had eaten, and it was like a bunch of bananas, a watermelon, and like some other fruit and like some lettuce or something. And I just looked at it, I was like, that's so crazy. But it stuck in my mind because, like I said, I did, doing Fuhrman, I loved fruit. I had really grown a taste for fruit. And
Mm.
it looked really clean and simple. And I really didn't like cooking. So that idea kind of appealed to me. And
Yeah.
then, I just started researching more and I went on Amazon again and looked up, raw diet book or something. And I came across Frederic Patenaude's The Raw Secrets. And I read that and it was completely different than anything else I'd read regarding raw. It was much more rational. It made sense. It wasn't just eat whatever raw foods and you'll be healthy regardless of how much fat you're eating. It was all about eating lower fat. And it just made a lot of sense to me. And I read it in one sitting and started implementing it very soon after. November 1st, I did like a 30-day experiment with that, and it worked really well for me.
That is really cool. Okay. And at this point, it sounds like you had kind of already reached a weight that you liked, but you were kind of just changing things to have an overall a better sense of well-being and more energy, and not have these problems associated with anemia.
Yeah, I could reach a weight, but I could never stick with it. I was kind of yo-yoing, not hugely, but
Yeah.
5 or 10 pounds. And so that was a little frustrating. And so then, by adopting a low fat, high fruit, raw diet, the weight just evened out. And then my anemia was just gone in like a few weeks. I mean, I didn't have to take a nap in the afternoon. I was fine driving. That was the most amazing thing. Also, other things that I wasn't really expecting any changes with, my restless leg syndrome, which is, basically, it happens whenever you're sitting still or lying down for, a relatively long period of time, and your legs or one of your legs, they feel like you just have to move them. For some people, it feels like bugs crawling around. For me, it's almost a pain.
Mm.
And so, sitting in class, fortunately in college, I had nice teachers who would let me, stand up and kind of walk around when I needed to. But trying to go to sleep, I mean, it would take me longer to fall asleep, because my legs would and so that went away. I mean, literally 24 hours it was gone and it's never returned. And
Yeah,
that was amazing.
that's incredible. Have you
It was
since
crazy.
that almost sounds like maybe a mineral deficiency thing. Have you looked into it at all, or?
I honestly, I can't pinpoint anything. It could be that. I think a lot of it maybe has to do with water too and hydration.
Uh-huh.
But honestly, I don't know. But that was really miraculous, and I wasn't expecting that. And then headaches, I'd have probably a mild headache every week or so. Those went away. Muscle cramps, knee pain that I would have, especially my left knee, fairly frequently stopped. I had more energy. I started exercising again. I could do step aerobics, which I loved, and I didn't have to worry about my knees. I mean, there was just so much more than I was expecting, and it just kept me going basically.
Now that's so amazing, and it's kind of interesting that like your first impression of this diet is this is so odd that this guy's eating this much, and then you do it for 30 days and you have all these benefits. It's kind of like experientially, it brings up something. I've been having discussions with other folks lately, and they're saying that I have a belief system. They're calling my interest in this way of living a belief system, and yet to me there's very practical evidence that it's successful. So, and I think you're another example of that. But anyway, since you mentioned increased energy and these other aspects of improved health, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, for the ladies, what effects did this have on ovulation? Because sometimes people get scared of a raw food diet. They think they're going to stop ovulating or something like that. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so this is kind of a more expanded issue that I can talk about here, but I didn't after it's hard to remember. It's been so long now, it's hard to remember exact dates, but um, I didn't ovulate for a good year and 6 months. Or I didn't menstruate, sorry. I didn't have any period for a good year and 6 months. I didn't get any blood work or anything tested, so I don't know if everything was there in terms of, FSH and luteinizing hormone and all of that. So I don't know for sure.
But you weren't concerned.
I wasn't at the time, no. And then basically when I started eating more greens and I started eating a little more calories because I was at a much lower weight at the time. When I started eating more greens and more calories, my period did come back and has remained since then.
Okay.
So, I know basically what I would advise is to get tested. I personally get tested once a year. I get blood work done. That
Yeah.
includes certain hormone tests as well. And I just think that's good for really everyone to do just to see where you stand. And so for women, I definitely would recommend certain hormone tests, whether you're menstruating or you're not, just to know where you stand. But especially if you aren't menstruating, because it could be because you aren't getting enough of something, you aren't getting enough iron or something else, or maybe you're fine. I don't know, but I would definitely recommend that. But for me, again, I didn't have any testing, but I would suspect that there was probably something wrong there because, again, I wasn't eating enough green vegetables at the time and I wasn't eating enough calories. So,
On this tack, is it possible to ovulate without menstruation?
I don't know for sure. I've never seen proof of someone, who wasn't menstruating but got test results and were perfectly fine. I honestly don't know.
Okay.
So it's one of those areas where, I don't even think I've ever heard any anecdotal evidence, from someone claiming to have done it. I honestly don't know.
Okay.
But I think a good thing too is that, most women have very horrendous experiences with periods in terms of pain and very heavy flows. And I know I did as well. And that for most women will change when you adopt a healthier lifestyle. So, I know luckily today it has changed. Most people are not recommending that you shouldn't have a period. For a long time in the raw movement, there were quite a few people who were recommending this. But for all of the raw vegan women who I can think of who are healthy, all of them menstruate. So
Okay.
if you aren't, I would definitely recommend getting that checked out.
Now, on those lines, would you say that the menstruation that they're having, it does not have the associated symptoms that the average woman experiences with conventional diets?
Definitely. I know mine is just so much better than it used to be. It used to be painful, especially my low back. I would get really bad pain. Sometimes, I remember laying in bed watching TV and crying. It really can be really bad. And I mean, again, everyone I can think of who's talked about it, it's improved tremendously. Little to no pain,
Yeah,
maybe, 3 to 4, 5 days instead of 7 to 8 days.
right.
And so that's something that definitely is really great.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you kind of did this 30-day experiment, and you ate raw, and you had lots of benefits. And then did you just kind of decide to stick with it, or what happened thereafter?
Yeah, so I stuck with it. Still was struggling a little bit with certain foods that I still wanted to eat, and so I would have those every once in a while. And yeah, I just kept doing and kept improving, and yeah, I mean, I kept up my energy. My restless leg syndrome was gone. My anemia didn't return. So yeah, it was great.
That's wonderful. And can you talk a little bit about, as you incorporated this into your life and it became your way of living, how did it affect your relationships with your family, like immediate family, and then also friends and stuff? And just talk a little bit about how do you interact with family and friends around this? I know some people, they basically decide to kind of divorce themselves from their families, and and that's one route. Uh, but I think a lot of people still want to communicate and have relationships with their family members. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so again, I've been very fortunate in that I've had people in my life who are very supportive and, obviously would voice their concerns if they had any. But, again, we'd talk about it and it was like, okay, obviously you know what you're doing, and, if you see anything wrong, you'll change it. And so I always had supportive people in my life. And luckily for me, like my parents have dramatically changed how they eat. And, my mom is a vegan. My dad eats predominantly vegan now. Again, this is a Southern 60-year-old man.
Yes,
And,
yes.
he doesn't drink milk anymore, or, I mean, he doesn't even drink coffee in the morning. I mean,
And that's
he's,
from you. That's from your influence.
yeah. And I literally, it can be very easy to be a little overzealous in the beginning, and we want to spread the message. We want to tell everyone, even if they don't care, they think we're crazy. And so it's really good to just do your own thing. And when people see that you're healthy, and, they'll flock to you and they'll want to know more. And so just naturally over time, they made those changes themselves. And I'm so happy that I was able to influence them to do that, because my dad's no longer on medication anymore. He's not on acid reflux. He's not on cholesterol medication. He's not on high blood pressure medication. I mean, that's great. That's great for me,
That's so
And
awesome. Yeah.
yeah,
And
so
how about your sister who experimented with veganism earlier? Has she kind of seen where you're coming from?
yeah, she eats, I believe, they live in California, but I believe she eats mostly vegan, vegetarian for the most part, and she'll have like some fish or something when she goes out to eat.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, she eats definitely, she does not eat like a standard American diet or anything like that. So.
Okay. Now, I know on your website you talk a lot about fitness and stuff. So it sounds like as you made these positive changes and you started having more energy, you started getting more active. Talk a little bit about that, about how you pursued fitness and perhaps what you're into now a little bit with that.
Yeah, so I started with fitness as far as exercising and whatnot, which I had tried a little in the past, but running and stuff never worked for me. And so I started just doing, DVDs, working out to DVDs, and that seemed to just, especially weight training, it just really resonated with me. And so I kept that up, and then again when the anemia got so bad, I just didn't have the energy to do it.
Right.
And so then going raw and having that energy and being able to work out again, I was just, I mean, it's great. Working out is something that I really enjoy doing, fortunately, and I really look forward to doing it. So I've just kept up with doing it over the years.
Right, right. Okay. And one thing I wanted to ask you is, I love this way you're kind of experimenting. It seems like you've kind of settled the issue for yourself. You know that the raw food diet's healthy. I think I saw one of your blood work videos, and your blood was just, it was incredible. One of the interesting things about it was that I think the omega-6-3 ratio or whatever was perfect. And I don't think you'd been doing anything with flax or anything. I think it was just the vegetables. So, I mean, the
Yeah.
fruits and vegetables, which is really amazing. But what I'd like to know is that I don't know if this has been the past year or so, but you've kind of been exploring different aspects of diet, almost in a kind of scientific, experimental way, but maybe for some personal reasons as well. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that. It sounds like you were raw for a long time, and then you decided to explore a little bit. So what's going on there?
Yeah, so earlier on, either in February or I think in March actually, I decided to start incorporating cooked food in my diet. And it's mostly just because, I preach a lot to people about priorities and having priorities. And, if a certain thing is not a priority in your life, you're not going to make time for it. You're not going to do it. You're not going to spend money on it, and you're not going to achieve your goals. And so for me, for a while now, because let's face it, a raw food diet is more expensive. Unless you have access to fruit trees and you have your own farm or something and you have a giant garden, I mean it's going to be more expensive. And so for me, I've believed for a long time that a mostly raw diet, as long as it's still predominated in fruits and vegetables, is just as healthy or is still a very, very healthy diet. You don't have to eat all raw to, be very healthy. And so, I was like, maybe I can incorporate some cooked food in my diet and save tremendously on my food budget every month and, have that extra money for something else or just save it.
Right.
And so, and plus, I thought it'd be a good way to experiment and connect more with my audience because most of the people who watch my videos are not 100% raw. Very few people who contact me eat a 100% diet and have for a long period of time. The people who do, usually it's like, oh, I've done it for a week. And so I figured that it'd be a good way to provide my own insight and to help others and all these different things. So I started doing that in March. And for the most part, it's been a pretty good experience. There have definitely been some things that I'm not super, jazzed about, but yeah, it's definitely been an experience.
Well, that's a great point there because I do hear, and I've experienced myself. I know it feels different if I drink like a 6 banana smoothie or I eat a plate of pasta. There's a different quality that happens in the body. So it seems like whenever there's some cooked food, it's not quite the optimum, and then the body will kind of tell you that. But having said that, I totally hear what you're saying about the cost, and you would know because you did this for a while. And did you try to go to farmers markets or distribution centers and buy cases of fruit and stuff like that, and you still couldn't get the cost down? Yeah.
Yeah, so unfortunately for me, I don't have any wholesale distributors in my area. There are a couple, but when I went to them, you're not allowed to actually go in the warehouse and pick out stuff, so they bring it out to you. And the cost, honestly, I could get stuff cheaper on sale just by going to my grocery store. So those weren't really an option for me. And then farmers markets, I find here, for the most part, are more expensive than anywhere else. I mean, often they're on par with Whole Foods.
Yeah.
So for
Yeah.
me, I love farmers markets, but they're not very cost effective.
Gotcha.
So for me, I shop, I look for sales and I shop at stores like Aldi and Costco and places like that. And I'm definitely able to get the cost down, but still there's just a point where you can't really go any lower unless you just start eating less food, which obviously is not a good option.
Okay. And in terms of foods that you have allowed that are cooked, what are those? Is it kind of like would pasta be in there, rice, potatoes, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I don't eat any pasta. I tend to go more whole food, so just brown rice and legumes and potatoes, squash, that sort of thing.
Okay. Okay. And then I know you did a great piece on I think it's chromium for the melon belly thing, and I'm wondering after all this time, what are your conclusions on supplementation, if any, is required? Like let's say B12, vitamin D, chromium, any that you think are necessary, and maybe that varies depending on if you're fully raw or partly cooked, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so this was an issue that I never really considered much of an issue in my early days eating raw. I thought that if you were doing it correctly, that you really wouldn't need to supplement, unless you got tested and were deficient in something.
Right.
And then I read a great article by Don Bennett, and he wrote about the chromium, the melon belly thing. So for people who don't know, there's a thing in the low fat, high fruit, raw food world that we call melon belly, where you eat melon, or it could be grapes or apples, but typically it's melon, and your stomach expands and you feel pain. And sometimes it's just in your stomach, sometimes it's the chest, it's the back, and it can be mild to pretty severe and last usually like 15 to 30 minutes, and then it goes away. And so usually, people just thought, oh, well, it's because you ate too much or something, and it's just not a big deal. Well, then, like I said, I read this article from Don Bennett where he talked about it actually could be indicative of a chromium deficiency, and he had tested them on himself and other people who he had consulted with, and basically supplemented with chromium. The issue went away. He stopped supplementing. The issue came back. I did it for myself. This would have been back in, I believe, the summer of 2011. And I supplemented with chromium because my issue wasn't so much with melons, it was more with grapes and apples.
Mm-hmm.
And I supplemented with chromium. I was able to eat like a full meal of apples without any pain whatsoever. And so that was really, really cool. And it really just opened up my eyes to, maybe our fruits and vegetables just don't have all of what we need for whatever reason. The most likely reason being that, unless you're buying or unless you're growing your own in optimal conditions,
Right.
That's not really, when you go and buy a tomato or something from the grocery store, they aren't grown with nutrients in mind. They're more grown with how big and beautiful can we make this food so that people will buy it, which isn't necessarily going to render the best, food. And again, it has to be hearty, which is going to sacrifice in terms of taste and nutrients and whatnot. So because of all that, and then I looked at the research and found multiple studies that looked at multiple studies showing that there has been a small drop in various nutrients in our foods. And so for me, I just decided to start supplementing. And so I do take a multivitamin that includes chromium, not every day, usually like 3 times a week or something. And then with B12, I think, the B12 issue, if you are vegan, you should be supplementing with B12. Fact of the matter is, fruits and vegetables do not contain B12. And so, again, get tested. But for the most part, from what I've seen, if you aren't taking a B12 supplement and you're not eating animal products, then there's a very high chance that you're going to be, at some point down the road, you're going to be insufficient. And the thing is, B12 deficiency is very serious. It can result in neurological damage. And there are people who have that because they didn't supplement for years. And it's just something that's so simple. Just take a supplement a couple times a week. It's really just something that people shouldn't be so hard-headed about,
I want to personally thank you, because it was my communications with you that pushed me into being more serious about it, and it actually resolved some like shaking I had in the fingers. So
That's good.
yeah. So, and I've been vegetarian for like 20 years and hadn't really taken it. And then when I went vegan, some symptoms that would crop up now and then over my vegetarian life became more pronounced when I became vegan. So, and then when I took the B12, it solved it. So I think it's a great practical point. If you have some kind of issue, don't be afraid to take some supplementation. It's not going to kill you. And the idea that we could somehow exactly duplicate the nutritional delivery of foods that we evolved on in today's marketplace, it's not really possible. Yeah. So, let's see. What else was I going to ask you? Well, I'd like you to tell the audience the name of your website and the books that you've written.
Yeah, so my website is fitonraw.com, FITONRAW.
Yep.
And earlier this year, I released my book, The Science of Eating Raw,
Yep.
which was Took me much longer than I thought it was going to. It's very research heavy. There's over 300 references in the book, and many of them, or over 300 scientific references in the book. I think there are over 600 references. It's pretty ridiculous, but it was, I think, a very important book for me to write because it focuses on nutrients and nutrient deficiency within the low fat raw movement, which I don't think is something that has been looked at very much. I think many people just, and I think it's a desire for us to kind of find the right diet and okay, it's great. We don't have to do anything else. You just eat it and you're perfect, you know, and it's just, it's not, hasn't been my experience. There are certain things that I've had to make changes with, or certain things I've had to pay attention to, like eating enough green vegetables, a good amount of green vegetables, and taking a B12 supplement, things like that, that I feel are very, very important. And so I go in depth in that. I have a whole chapter dedicated to basically every nutrient and looking at how you can meet those needs on a raw vegan diet.
That's great. That's great. Now, I don't want to spend a huge amount of time on this, but I know it's kind of a big issue in the raw movement, and I think you've addressed it quite a bit. So maybe you could talk a little bit about, you know, my perception is that there is a basic equation of calories in, calories out, weight gain, weight loss. And that if you keep the diet constant and you vary the level of physical activity, that's going to affect weight gain or weight loss. And if you keep the physical activity constant and vary the amount of caloric intake, that's going to affect weight loss or weight gain. And I wonder if you might talk a little bit about that. Now, I'll say also, I'll put a qualifier in there. I do think there is a distinction in terms of weight loss between, say, a complete raw food and cooked vegan, because I've heard of folks, you know, shifting back to cooked vegan and then they gain weight. So I don't know if that's directly a calorie issue or maybe salt or other issues, but just if you could weigh in a little bit on this.
Yeah, definitely. So, you know, this is, it's funny because this is an issue that really shouldn't be an issue, I feel like.
Yeah.
Excuse me. This is one of those things that really should be non-controversial, just like eat more fruits and vegetables. I mean, everyone else that's in the field of diet nutrition agrees that, you know, it's calories in, calories out, basically. You know, if you eat more calories than your body is using, you're going to gain more weight. If you eat less, you're going to lose weight. But unfortunately, we have this thing going on in the raw food movement where many people believe that you can eat as much as you want as long as it's fruits and vegetables and you won't gain weight. And yet there are tons of people like myself who have tried this method and have gained significant body fat. And it's not just gaining weight. You know, for me, my blood pressure went up. My energy was lower because I was heavier. So exercising just wasn't something I was interested in. And my digestion was really poor.
And you were still exercising while that happened, right?
Yes, definitely. And then it got to a point where it's just like, I slowly stopped exercising because I was so heavy. I just couldn't, it didn't feel good on my body to jump around and do that stuff when I was so much heavier.
Let me ask you on that. When you did that, were you kind of eating whatever you felt like eating? Were you forcing yourself to take in excessive calories? Was it hard to eat that much? Or was it like, I really want, you know, this much? How did that go down?
Yeah, so for me, number one, I come from a past of binging and bulimia, so I can automatically eat more food. And even before that as a kid, I mean, I would have eating contests with people. I would have, you know, I remember I came home from school one day and I was like, you know what, I'm going to eat a whole pizza. And I did. I ate an entire pizza as like a 14-year-old girl, you know? So I always kind of had that just, I don't know, I've just always been able to eat a lot of food. And so, so that for me, this was basically what led to me eating more green vegetables. So I did feel the need to eat more food. I would eat like a 10 banana smoothie. That's like 1,000 calories and still want other food. And so eventually I did tie it to, you know, minerals and just not eating enough green vegetables. So once I started doing that, literally almost immediately, I started to see a decrease in the amount of fruit I wanted just naturally. So it's not like I went from eating as much as I wanted and then calorie restricting and I lost the weight. I went from eating as much as I wanted because I really wanted that food to just naturally not wanting as much because I was meeting my nutritional needs.
Yeah, this is a very interesting point. So, and I think this is common in the SAD, community where they're gorging themselves on foods that have no nutritional value, and so they're not really ever getting satisfied. So,
Right.
yeah, that's a great point. Um, let's see. What else? I wonder if you could say a little bit about it. You've done a really nice thing, I think, with your website and your book and the way you interact with your community of listeners and viewers. And I wonder if you might have a few tips for folks on business development and pursuing this as a career. I don't know if this is the only thing that you do, if you do other things as well, but maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I would say the main thing I think is to do research on, having an online business and internet marketing because you are going to have to market yourself to some degree. And I know a lot of people don't, it's a dirty word, but doing some research on that and keeping things as simple as possible. And, I think a lot of people really get caught up in the technical aspect. People who really, they don't understand how to set up a website or anything like that. It can be so easy to get caught up in just the technical aspect of all of that, and you can really get stalled because you just feel like there's so much that you don't know.
Right.
And there are so many people, you can hire a programmer for very, very not a lot of money to help you out with little things that you don't understand. And so, which will allow you to focus on the most important stuff like creating content and figuring out exactly what you want to do. But I think doing research and having a set plan to stick to, and really treating it like, it's a business. This isn't just some blog that I'm starting to have fun with. If you really want this to be, something that makes you money, you have to treat it a little more seriously than if you're just, starting a YouTube channel or a blog or something like that.
Okay. All right. I see I have 2 minutes, and I know you have to be somewhere. Can I ask you one more really huge question, and you can cut it off whenever you want?
That's fine, sure. Yeah.
It seems that you primarily went down this path for health reasons, but
Yes.
I wonder if along the way the ethical and environmental aspects of this became relevant to you, and what you might say about those things.
Yeah, that's an excellent question actually. So, yeah, when I first did this, it was all for health. I didn't, I've always been an animal person. I've always had animals. I've always, like I said, I was a pet sitter. I did that because I love cats. I love dogs. And so, but for me, it was never an issue that I was really concerned about, I guess. I never really thought of it in terms of, because it's just cows and pigs and sheep. I honestly didn't, it
Right.
didn't concern me. And then, interestingly enough, I bought a book for my mom called Eating Animals. It's a really excellent book. And she read it and immediately was like, I'm not eating animal products. I'm going completely vegan. And so I was like, oh, wow, it was that powerful? Because I hadn't actually read the book, but it was
Wow.
something I knew she was kind of interested in. So I bought it for her. And so then I read the book and I was like, wow, this is really, I can't believe that this is what happens. I think I was still, even though I had been vegan for a long time, I think I was still kind of in the mindset that, animals, yeah, they're killed, but they're slaughtered quickly. They aren't living in this abject horror that is the reality in terms of factoring farming. And
Yeah.
so learning that, it just really, I was like, wow, it really, even though I'd been vegan, it really strengthened my resolve to just, wow, I could never eat animal products ever again, knowing what I know about what happens in terms of factory farming. So yeah,
Absolutely.
I definitely am an ethical vegan, actually, thanks to my mom. So yeah.
That's great. And then anything that you've picked up along the way in terms of environment, like of course the water usage is astronomical for producing livestock, but anything you might add, like as far as how we're benefiting the environment by being vegan?
Yeah, I think the most important thing you can do in terms of if you're concerned about the environment is to give up meat. And I know people, I don't consider myself an environmentalist, but I know people who do and who ride their bikes to work and who are very, very strict when it comes to energy usage, but they eat meat and animal products. And to me, I mean, you're a hypocrite at that point, given what we know now, given the research that's come out that says that, look, factory farming is the worst thing. It's the worst thing for the environment. It's even worse than transportation. So if you call yourself an environmentalist and you still eat, chicken every day for lunch, it's just there's a disconnect there, definitely. So, again, I don't really consider myself an environmentalist, but I do think it's important to not just destroy what we have and to make this place as great for us and our children as we can. And a really simple way to do that is just to cut out animal products. I mean, if you do nothing else, you are making such a huge contribution.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I do have one more question, if you'll allow me. One thing I noticed that Dr. Fuhrman, I think an aspect of his practice is recognizing that each person is an individual. And I think that plays a big role for him. And then on what might be considered another side, you can look at human beings as a species. And generally speaking, if you give them the diet which we evolved on, and I know that's debatable, what did we evolve on, but let's say there was some diet that we evolved on and you gave that to the human species, would that not be the most health-inducing diet? What could you say about these two ways of looking at human physiology?
Yeah, I think in terms of Dr. Fuhrman, I think he definitely does believe that most people, pretty much everyone, should be eating a diet that's high in fruits and vegetables and low in animal products. I don't think he would say any differently than that. But of course, we are individuals, and I know he's seen in some people, he's seen taurine deficiency, and by supplementing with taurine, they've been able to fix certain problems. Some men who have a lot of trouble converting ALA to EPA and DHA, and so just supplementing with some, vegan forms of those really, really helps. And some other just minor things that, we are different, and we do convert. We have different conversion rates of certain nutrients, and some of us have actual health problems and conditions that will affect what we need in our diet and what we need to supplement with. But even I like to say when I was in college, my minor was in anthropology, and all of my anthropology professors agreed that our ancestors ate primarily foraged foods. So basically plants, some bugs, but mostly plants. That was our bread and butter, so to speak. And usually it was, 70% of our diet was foraged foods. And in fact, I had an anthropology professor who called us gatherer hunters instead of hunter gatherers.
I love that you're saying this, Swayze, because I run into folks on the internet who are like adamant that they're trying to convince themselves that we're really meat eaters, and it's really a stretch. I mean, I don't know how they. Maybe sometime you could connect me with some good anthropology works that really address this. But anyway, I know I'm running over on your time, and I just want to thank you so much for everything you're doing. You're an inspiration. It's great work. Think of how many people you're saving. Just thank you very much. Thanks for taking the time to do this, and good luck in all your endeavors.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
Bye, Paul.
Bye.
Bye.